Welcome back, everyone. Now, without wasting any further time, we will be starting our second panel for the day. I will quickly introduce all the debaters who are part of this panel. First, we have Amit Sharma, who is the CHRO at Volvo Group India, who comes with more than 2 decades of experience in HR and IR. He has worked in multiple sectors like manufacturing, electronics, BFSI, IT, and FMCG, and has worked with brands like Johnson & Johnson, Philips, and Indian Oil. Next, we have Vikas K. Khokha, Head of Human Resource at Dhanuka Hygritech. Again, a very senior HR professional with more than 25 years of professional experience and more than 2 decades of experience in the HR domain. He has worked in sectors like manufacturing, IT, and telecom. Then we have Ritu Raina. She is the CHRO at Quick Heal. She carries more than 2 decades of experience in HR and its different functions. She has an experience of serving in different sectors like telecom, BFSI, IT, and technology. Then we have Ravi Kumar, Head HR of Roche Diabetes Care India. He carries more than 20 years of experience in HR and has been associated with the Roche brand for almost 15 years now. Then we have Ashish Anand, who's the Group CHRO at SAR Group, who comes with 20 years of experience in HR function. He has worked in sectors like BFSI, FMCG, and automobile. The session will be moderated by Amit Gautam, who is the CEO of Upside LMS, which is an AI-powered learning management platform. Amit is an alumni of IIM and NIT and a key idea generator for Upside LMS's product team, and is also regarded as a great mentor for each and every function in his company. So welcome, Amit. Thank you so much for joining. The topic for this session is, are we all racing to reskill? Which skills will be critical for future resilience? So before I ask Amit to take over and start the session, I would like to remind all the viewers about the Q&A tab. Please feel free to post your questions to the panel. At the end of the session, the panel will take as many questions as they can and try to make it a more interactive discussion. So over to you, Amit. Please take over and carry on the discussion. All the best to all the debaters and all the best, Amit. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And sorry for a little delay from our side, but we'll get right started. And I think Karthik did mention the topic, we are trying to discuss about reskilling. And of course, as we all know, the context is the new normal or the new situation we are all in. So, we have a group of, speakers today. They come from diverse experience and backgrounds. So I'm really, really happy to be a part of this session today. And, from my side, what I'll do is I'll try to kind of pose the right questions to everyone and pick their brains about their experiences, their insights. And, I just really excited that this will be a good session for all of us now. So reskilling is what we are discussing today. And as we all know, it has always been kind of a critical component of overall L&D strategy. It is driven by the business need to do more with less, to allow people to learn and grow. And it also acts as a very strong catalyst to bring in the new and the right talent. But sometimes it is also driven by changes in the landscape, the business landscape, the ecosystem, and even the disruptions in the ecosystem. Something changes outside our company, and we might have to go and reskill a few people, or maybe more than few people. More or less, it's not like a standard rule, but more or less it can be planned for and approached with a reasonable clarity and resources at hand. You know what you want to do in the next 3 months, 6 months. You have a plan in mind for the roles, for the people, for the teams. But this is not the case when the entire business ecosystem, and not just one or two industries, but literally like all of them faced an instant, sudden, massive and pervasive disruption caused by a pandemic. And in addition to putting people's lives and safety at risk, it also put the entire businesses at risk. The kind of, as offices shut down across the world, and there's no option to conduct business but to do it virtually or digitally. And that was a huge change for businesses, to be operating under. The sheer scale and the disruption and the impact of the disruption did pose a big challenge of almost like another dimension to the HR and L&D leaders. In a single day, everything changed. We had new things to look at. We have new priorities to define. But as always, with the dual objective of ensuring people's well-being and safety, and also to adapt to the changes happening, all of us, the HR and the L&D leaders and everybody, we all scrambled to reskill to even survive, let alone grow. Our first thought was, how do we survive this? How do we go beyond this challenge, come out safe and sound? And then, of course, we can grow as we kind of are resilient to this one. So this was almost like a new race, a race to reskill. And a race, unfortunately, the time was already over. We did not really have time to think and plan for this kind of a race. So, in terms of, as a business owner, I have the same challenges now, where we ourselves as a company, though we are not very big, but we are running against time to reskill almost all our people. In my interactions over the last 15 months or so with so many people also indicate that this is now a very high priority challenge in front of all the L&D and HR leaders. As I said, today I have a great and diverse group of HR and D leaders. They have, in the last almost now 18 months or so, they have been at the forefront of navigating this challenge. They have been at the forefront of handling the situation. And I'm sure they have a lot to share with us today about their experiences and their insights on, how do they prioritize, or do they define, or they look at the reskilling as a component of the strategy. And our speakers come from a domain, as diverse domain as healthcare, cybersecurity, cars and automobiles, agri-tech, and even, from a diverse group of companies. And, if I just calculate roughly, I think among them, they have about more than 110 years of experience, across not just these industries, but many more they have been a part of in their career so far. So I'm really excited to listen to them today. And, without kind of wasting much time, I'll ask, our speakers to quickly introduce themselves, just enough to give the context to the audience. And we'll start with Ritu as we go along. And then we just spend about a minute each for our introduction. And then we'll start with the debate. Ritu, please.
Thank you, Amit. And it's a pleasure to be here to share the experience, though it has not been, we had a great experience in the past 1.5 years. But I'm happy to share that experience with over 2 decades of experience, have worked across industry, right from BFSI to manufacturing, and now in technology, which is the most evolving one. I think there's a lot to share and reflect upon.
Thank you, Ritu. Ravi, please.
Thanks, Amit. Pleasure to be here. Again, like Ritu, a lot of years of experience in different industries, currently with healthcare, like Amit said, but before this, building materials as well as engineering and construction. Happy to be here. Lots of learnings, like Amit says, in the last 18 months, a lot of unlearning as well. I hope to share a little bit of that from my side and learn from the rest of the panel.
Yes, Vikas, please.
Thanks. I think I echo with all other participants, having had experiences in very diverse industries like telecommunications, office automation, healthcare, and then now in chemicals and fertilizers. I think last 1 year has really taught us how steep a learning curve could be without knowing what future is, right? And you have to just keep guessing what the future is and try to arrive at that platform, which could best fit. I think I'm looking forward to this interaction to create more learning models for future, because the industry I'm in is actually in a complete transformation phase, and I'm in the transformation journey with them. So I think it will be a great learning experience for me to pave way into what new era looks like, which is coming forward.
Sure. Ashish, yes, please.
Sorry, it was for me.
Yes, Ashish.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear it. So thanks a lot. I come with around 20 or 21 years of an experience in BFSI, entire range of BSI other than a bank. Worked across investment banking, NBFC, housing finance, brokerage, insurance setup. So prior to that, with consumer goods company in India and international market in Middle East, North Africa, and prior to that, in startup in automobile. So I've been partly in my whole journey, I've been a startup to scale guy in all the companies I've worked with. This organization is quite diversified, right from e-commerce to energy storage to new technology, etc. So one of the things I'm here actually to give to understand from all our fellow panelists and some from if any questions people have, how the world is morphing towards it. What we have learned over the years is no longer valid. Nobody has a playbook. So how do you live life without playbook? Is my key takeaway, and that's the way I would look at it. Thank you.
Yes, Amit, please.
Yeah. No, it's a pleasure being here. First of all, I think for me, if I look at it, the last more than 2 decades of my career has been across industries like healthcare, automobile currently, and before that, oil and gas. So I've seen 3 different broad buckets where things have really fundamentally changed. And if I really look at it going forward, and I was actually just reading a small report which was published by McKinsey some time back, said that from a skills perspective, almost there'll be 60% higher need for technology skills and almost 26% higher need for social and emotional skills, which will be there. So the future is both the technical as well as software aspects. They'll be equally there. So kind of happy to share my learnings and also kind of hear learnings from others and hear the experiences of others to see how we can have a good discussion in the next 1 hour.
Thank you, everyone. Just a small request, if except the speaker, we could all put ourselves on mute while the speaker is speaking. That'll really help. And so Ravi, we'll start with you. You are in the domain of healthcare, and is I think one of the few industries who could not have afforded to be like shut down, or if at all you have kind of doubled up all your efforts. And of course, the entire country stands grateful to the entire healthcare industry, the frontline workers who have done so. But in your experience, coming from a healthcare background, how do you see the skills landscape in your current situation? And what are the skills or the capabilities priorities for you in your company in the short term and even the long term? And of course, what are your learnings from the pandemic?
Sure. Thanks, Amit. And I think though we are in healthcare, we have still been impacted as much as any of the other industries. It's just that in our situation, we've had no choice, like you rightly said, to stay home or also stay away from the pandemic, because we were in the middle of the pandemic. So we are in the testing business, as an example, and PCR tests, all of us know, and now D-dimer and some ferritin tests as well are actually prescribed to manage the healthcare situation. So my employees have been on the ground. They've been at the forefront. They are also considered to be frontline workers otherwise in terms of how the government sees them. And I think there are some very big lessons here for us, Amit. And I don't think it's going to be very different from what others have learned. It's just that we have been in the front line. So possibly we have, had to change ourselves and, like I said, unlearn a little bit faster than other industries. So we didn't have any time. We went straight into the eye of the storm, if I may call it that. Yeah. So coming to your question, it was more about really, focusing on what we had before. So what you do in a healthcare business, and this happens in most other organizations as well, is that you build the right relationships, and right access, because access is very important for us. Either it's the government, either it's the private hospitals, or the patient at large. Or if you look at what's happening on the ground in terms of a real rural healthcare situation as well. So access, very important, and therefore the relationships with customers, with patients are extremely important. Till now, my salesperson would do this, face to face, and I think all of us know how this happens. But coming to a sudden situation sometime in March last year, where everyone just had to turn around and do it digitally. And not just digitally, I think there was a period where it would be just on the phone. People did not discover Zoom at that moment. Customers were not really open to having a call the way we were having it today. So I think this is one of the biggest things, that we have learned, Amit. It's all about being very agile, being quick to pick up what's happening on the ground and to imbibe that. So I think this is, in some ways, not just a skill, but a mindset that we have learned in this pandemic, that the earlier you are able to turn this around, the earlier you're able to do what your patients, your doctors, your customers want you to do, and the way they want you to do it. There's no choice, right? So this pandemic really taught us that there's no choice. We have to really unlearn and jump into it. And the other aspect was also about service, right? So we are in the business of providing service. Someone is unwell, someone is wanting to test themselves, we have to be there. No questions asked, right? So you wear a mask, you wear protective gear, etc. You need to be there. There's no question of staying home, staying safe. You have to be out there. So I think that's the other ethos that most of our guys in our industry learned, is about being there when you are required. So it's what is the higher purpose? The higher purpose is to be there when a patient requires you, and I think we were able to do that, and and we were forced to do that in many ways, right? You could not just stay away from it. And thirdly, I think it's also about innovation, Amit. A lot of processes in the organization really had to change quite a bit. Those good old days of you would put something into a system, it would go to your manager, you approve it. Those days were over, right? So it had to be quickly changed. And I think the agility in terms of processes at an organization level is also something that happened to us, and we had to learn very quickly and unlearn some of the old processes and adapt to what was happening on the ground. So I would say, in short, these are some of the learnings that we had on the ground in the last 18 months.
Great, thank you, Ravi. No, I agree. I think one of the first steps to building resilience is the agility to respond. And because this, as you said, touched across the organization, even with customer-facing interactions, and the processes have changed. I think a lot of unlearning and relearning, and also understanding the importance of the new things. So I'm sure it has been, kind of a challenge, especially when people in your healthcare industry had to also risk their security and safety to be able to serve customers. So again, thank you for all the efforts and the hard work. But yes, I think does kind of give us a good background to what we are looking for today. And moving from healthcare to, let's say, cybersecurity, which is where Ritu comes from. And while of course healthcare is a lot of front-facing, you would have done in the last 18 months, and I'm sure even for Quick Heal, cybersecurity is a lot of customer-facing interactions. But I'm also very curious to see, because when everything moved digital and virtual, I know we have a cloud offering to our customers, and the first thing they asked was, how do we manage information security, data privacy? And cybersecurity is a bigger organism than just these 2-3 things, right? It's a complex kind of a living organism about how we keep everything safe and secure for our customers, employees, personal, official data. So Ritu, from in your last 18 months, what have you seen as the, let's say, the lasting impact of reskilling? I'm sure you have done a lot of reskilling at your side, but and I know most of this is also maybe irreversible in some ways. So what have you seen emerging as the lasting impact of reskilling with respect to your industry, which is cybersecurity? And not only dynamic, but also it has now become almost like a default or a necessary or imperative part of your the practices at your company.
Thanks, Amit, for the question. I would say that for us, it was a fast forward into future. It was there even in pre-COVID, but people were not accepting digitalization so easily. Of course, people were lying low and lagging in the cybersecurity as well. So for us as an industry and as a company, the changes were overnight, because suddenly when your employees start working from home, the first thing you start asking yourself, how secure is the data? You would have so many accesses in the office they have to go through. So obviously there was an upsurge in the market. And upsurge was about security, about sensitivity. So there were two elements of it. One is how do you provide and make your customers secure? Second, you as a company, how do you create that readiness to service these customers? Now, I just want to take a slight, I would say a deviation here. When the whole digitalization was happening, in that world, what is really happening is your physical world is getting replaced by a virtual world. Your physical world has many gatekeepers, from your police, from your society, from your home lock. Your virtual world has no gatekeepers. And sometimes, though we have been doing digitally so many things, we also get scared when we have to do a transaction, a huge amount of transaction on the bank platform. So I think with that, what started happening is with this upsurge, readiness of the organizations to cater to the customers suddenly became abrupt, suddenly became overnight. So many VPNs, so many remote accesses. Now the question is, if I have to really look at the cybersecurity industry, one of the major challenges we are facing is the shortage of the talent. If I have to look at US alone, by 2021, they are saying we have a shortage of 3.5 million cybersecurity professionals. Vis-a-vis 2014, where it was 1 million lesser than this, which means this gap is increasing every day. And with digitalization and upsurge, it only got doubled. So going back to the statement which you said in the beginning, are we racing to reskill? I would say we are panting to reskill. Racing is still a small word, but at the same time, now they have two choices. As you rightly said, the pandemic taught us we don't have a choice and we have to adapt. Now, in this adaptation, if we have to really keep an upsurge with the market, we can't afford to buy talent at whatever cost and keep hiring them. And, then people start doing job shopping in these hot jobs. Rather than that, we have to create a mechanism of upskilling, which we have done. For example, we used various platforms like Pluralsight and others to upskill our people. We created micro learning sessions where our experts would come and train the other employees. Not only that, there were many government organizations who were looking support from us to train their people, because we being in the industry for 25 years is a long time for us to have those skill sets. So I think we are just panting to reskill, but yes, there is no choice. Time is short. It is here and now. It is learn, move, and adapt. I won't say that there is any other third thing. And this, I would say, a situation is like, the reason the situation is like this is also, you teach technology, digitalization from colleges nowadays, language, C++, Java is taught to everyone. But we don't teach them how breaches are done, what mindset we should have for the threat researchers. We say, okay, first we need to have a society, then we will have police. Unfortunately, you need to have both in parallel. I think there has to be change eventually in the education system, because when we are moving to fully digitalized world. But yes, right now we are trying to make as much we can do with whatever talent we have. The focus, which was 20% on reskilling, has moved to 80%, because we can't afford to hire talent ready-made from the market. There is no talent out there. And the one which is there is too expensive for us to hire. So I think that is how we are trying to rush this race.
Very rightly said, Ritu. And I think, and I know from my own experience that, apart from reskilling your own employees, I would say there's a huge demand for reskilling the customers on how to use technology, because certainly a lot of workforce which never use all the technologies are now using them, and they may not have the best practices, using an unsecure phone or an unsecure laptop, and they wouldn't even know what they're doing wrong. So I think the multiple the points of failure are now increasing beyond a point where they are comfortably handled. So I could imagine the challenges you face, and of course with the talent, I think that's a common challenge across industries. There is a huge shortage of talent in many ways, and yes, as you said, we really can't just go and hire at any cost, because that is not a good strategy for the long term. It may help in the short term, but not in the long term. But thank you, Ritu. I think that was really insightful. With that, I would definitely want to move to the world of agri-tech. It's always intrigued me, a very exciting domain. In fact, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of innovations coming from this domain. And I can imagine in the last 18 months that would have just sped up because there's so many things happening. Agri-tech cannot be left behind in terms of how they innovate. So Vikas, and I'm sure you'll agree that your industry would have seen a dramatic change in the last 18, 19 months. So how are you preparing for your talent, for such a huge change? And what skills and say core competencies or leadership competencies right now you're focusing on to just kind of tide over this wave and also be prepared for the unknown future?
Thanks, Amit, for just in a summary, reiterating what we have gone through in the last 18 months. And I'm taking you all across that remote village where there is a farmer and there's a small retailer, couple of distributors who never thought, they could ever be on a technology platform. And they were always physical meetings, including our own people. They were all used to meeting people physically, right? And doing all the transactions over calls or meetings. Nobody thought they could open up a laptop and start working on Zoom. And that was a big change for us. And while I state that story, I think it's reskilling is our own transformation journey at Dhanuka. Because we had to get everybody on the board in terms of getting them skilled. So first, our priority was to get some critical talent identified and get them completely skilled into this new ecosystem. Develop some kind of ecosystem which helps people to self-learn, this whole platform. So we kind of got people into completely online learning platforms, educated them to start assimilating things online on their own. That's how you start transforming, and that's how they'll teach their distributors and farmers to be on board, right? So first they have to be on board. So that those ecosystem and platforms helped us to get people to start learning. We can learn wherever we are sitting. Initially, there were a lot of hiccups. Then we moved ahead. Typically, skills around balancing human and machine again, where you still need a human intervention while you can adapt to machine. Digital flexibility had to brought in and people sometimes did not have laptops. People did not have mobile phones. We had to actually get that deepened into that remote site where the people were present with those technology platforms, right? Get them to that. Then getting them into networks, because not every village or every town will have the kind of network that we get over here to upstage a video call. So we had to get that particular network for people or get them to a convenient location where they could get the network. Also handling of complex data and information, because market information was all digitalized. So people should be able to handle that data, and that was a big change. Otherwise there were, herds of papers they used to carry, and that was an era. So I think that whole transformation was getting all these new skills into them. And now to build it up, we also had to take a build versus buy decision, right? We decided that we had to transform, we had to get people from other industries, typically FMCG industries who are a little ahead of us, right? To get people into that ecosystem, we started hiring people from those industries. And I'm talking of last 18 months. And we had very successful stints with leaders who could come and train our people coming from those industries, right? Typically the FMCG sectors. And also train the whole channel to move in a very different manner, the way the existing agri channel was moving, right? Having distributors or retailers who had never sold in their life agri products to get them on board into the channel. So even that buying decision had to happen, very super fast, and then getting them on board and training them. On leadership, again, a lot of sensitivity was involved, because as leaders, people were not sensitive. They were not used to an idea of people not being in front of the customer. So you had to teach them to be more empathetic, be more inclusive, right? With the idea that people could be operating remotely and still be working, right? That's an idea. What questions they need to ask the leaders to be able to assimilate or to be able to get the output. What questions they need to ask people, how do they need to coach people, how do they need to guide people. So even that coaching and guidance to leaders was very important. Most important part was getting that, moving things from that typical P&L mindset for a leader, to well-being of your team member, because one of the team members, family member is not well, somebody's distributor has expired. So you had to move your mindset as a leader from typically, talking of only numbers to more of a well-being manager. So these were the areas that leadership shift was also required in an agri-tech industry because people were not used to it, right? So it's been a tremendous journey. Like I mentioned earlier, the journey is on. We have just kickstarted it, but I'm just waiting for an exciting future that will face. And this whole transformation, I feel, is going to be very beneficial for entire agri sector. I'm not talking of organization Dhanuka, where I'm working, but entire agri sector is going to ramp completely up with this upswing which has happened.
No, I totally agree. I think the innovations happening at Dhanuka and other companies, the entire sector is looking kind of set for a big change. And I think I did hear, and I agree. One is well-being of the employees and the leadership coaching. I think that is something which I have also seen being in focus. And we'll anyway circle back for a quick. And I would want to definitely ask all of you after all we're all done that quickly list about 5 key or 5 or 6 skills very quickly, which is right now in your the focus set for now and future. So we'll come back to that. But moving on to Amit. Amit, you are from cars and automobiles industry, and I think there have been your own ups and downs in the industry in the last 18 months. I've seen some reports of the sales going down, sales going up, and of course, auto sector is really affected heavily by anything which happens in the country. So I'm sure you've been through your own challenges, and that gives you a different kind of challenge to retain people, to motivate people, and then grow as a company. So in your experience, what skills did you have to inculcate in your workplace, or what do you think you want to inculcate in your future workplace to ensure that there's a high sustained performance in the way work is evolving? How do you ensure that?
Thanks. Just to kind of give you a perspective, I initially mentioned about some percentages about what is the increase will happen both in technical skills and social skills. And almost about going forward, 26% increase going forward will be in the key social skills. What we believe that more than just the technical skills which are coming forward, the software aspects will play a key role. The larger leadership aspect, the larger behavioral aspects, because that itself is undergoing a tremendous change. Because a lot of technical skills will get automated. In one of the reports mentioned that almost about 66% of the manual work will get automated in next few years. But at the same time, when it comes to empathy and support, only 23% is what some of these technology or apps can do. But you still need 64% human touch. So there is a lot of effort and a lot of focus which will be required to be built when it comes to the larger software aspects in the teams. So what's going to change? Because what we have seen in the last 1 year, fundamentally that, and many of others, my panelists have also talked about, that the world around us has fundamentally changed. So which means what? Ability to work with virtual teams. Now somebody also mentioned that. How do you really make people believe that yes, even if you are working from anywhere in the world, you can be still effective? The difference between work and the workplace. Earlier the work and the workplace used to be same, but now we are saying that the work and workplace are two different things. My workplace may be my office, but I can work from anywhere else. Now the comfort of doing that is not very easy. Everybody still doesn't get it. We do see people who still want people to be in front of them when it comes to working, especially in the non-IT sectors or in manufacturing sectors, because that's where the ways of working has always been physical and face to face. So it's not just about tools, it's about that mindset that a person can be anywhere else and can be equally productive. And same is the case with a situation with how do you really make that person then integrate with the larger culture of the organization. When the teams are distributed, how do you really build the culture? When teams are distributed, how do you inculcate the larger organizational values in the person? How do you make the person believe this is what organization stands for? These are the ways of working. These are the ways of interaction. This is what is done. This is what is not done. This is what is acceptable. This is what is not acceptable. All of that happens when people are there together. The moment we separate them out into virtual teams, then building this piece becomes an equally big challenge. So that's going to be a key challenge in future around how do you build culture, how do you build the ability in the people to work virtually. Second piece will be working with ambiguity. Now, again, we're going to be in situations now where we really won't know in terms of what's to be done. There won't be a playbook. Somebody mentioned that earlier, in the world without playbook, and that's exactly what is happening. There is no playbook to decide how do we really act at this particular time. We all thought we had done with the COVID wave last year. Things will be much better this year, with the vaccine availability and all of that stuff. And suddenly a tsunami of a wave hit us, and which was 4 times more lethal than what it was last year. So how do you really, and then we had to very quickly adapt to this change which had hit just suddenly. So how do you work in such ambiguous scenario? How do you really, work in a scenario where there is no structure, there is no playbook, there is no defined process? You have to think it on the fly and implement it, learn by your mistakes, and again re-implement it. Now that ability is very critical. So that's something which is important, which needs to be built in, because world is going to be extremely more uncertain, I would call it, in future than what it is now. Similarly, when you are executing things, how do you execute it in a sustainable manner? Now, the world is again talking about being carbon neutral, especially in our industry, because our industry typically uses diesel engine technology. And then is it really the most sustainable, power option? We can debate about it. So people have their views around it. And the world is moving towards more electromobility. We are seeing world is moving towards fuel cell technology, including Volvo. We have also done, set up a separate focus around how do you really have our powertrains, which are more, electric in nature, and also have a hybrid working methodologies. But then, how do you really make it even more sustainable? How do we really make our organizations more carbon neutral? How do we make our organizations more environment friendly? Whatever we are doing, ensuring that the larger sustainability of the planet is up to the forefront. It's not just doing it, but doing it in a responsible way, doing it in a sustainable way. That's going to be a key skill going forward, which people need to understand. It will not be just doing things. The other thing I would call it is being comfortable in the beta world. In the IT sector, we are very used to our apps getting updated every 2-3 days. You go to the Play Store, you say a new version has come up or some update has come up. You click on it, our app gets updated, and we understand that's the way of working in this sector. But that is also going to be the way of working everywhere else. We are never going to have a perfect solution on day one. We'll all have to continuously work towards a better solution. We'll create some product, create some process, create some system, take feedback, again work on it, debug it, improve it, debug it, improve it. So ability to be comfortable in that fact that we never achieve perfection on day one, and perfection is something which is going to be a continuous journey. Doing things in a better way is going to be a continuous journey. That's a major mindset shift in our kind of industries, which needs to happen. That we need to be comfortable in this concept of a beta, and we need to be comfortable. People need to be comfortable in this process of constantly upgrading themselves. The other piece which I'll bring in is how do you really are open to multiple perspectives. Now, many times what happens is people tend to really hold on to their views because they have seen it. That's the way world worked earlier. They have their experiences because those perspectives are built through various experiences which somebody kind of accumulates over the years. Now, and many times we hold on to those experiences because if somebody comes up with a problem statement, people will immediately dip into their experience and say, oh, I remember doing in a particular way some time back, let's do it like that. Without understanding that the world will be very different today. Whatever the solutions were at that point of time may not work today. We have seen it so many times that whatever worked 20 years back, it's not going to work today. Even look at snacks for that matter. We are now looking at more healthy snacking rather than the fried snacking, which used to be the norm at some point of time. So I was speaking to one of the friends who was working in a fast food or a snacking industry, and she mentioned that the noodles which we created were a big hit. But today, if you really want it, our company itself will think twice before introducing it because it's not really a healthy snack as such. So how do you really open to multiple perspectives around it, understand the world has changed, and constantly kind of relook at yourself? That's the key skill which organizations need to inculcate in the workforce. And the last point which I'll bring in is more about leadership, because in future, what will also happen that the leadership itself will not be somebody who has a hierarchical tag of a leader. If you are a manager, that's why you are a leader, or you have been designated as a vice president or a director, that's why you are a leader. That's not going to happen. Leadership will be something about who knows that subject best. Things will work, people will need to work in a network of teams, and in network of teams, somebody may be a fresher who's just joined an organization 2 years back, but if that person, he or she knows that subject better, that person will take the leadership. So people will also, so this is an unlearning which needs to be done on the part of the leaders going forward, in terms of doing away with their tags of just because I'm a manager, I'm a leader, but it's like who knows the, but knowledge will be the leadership criteria. Leadership will become more like a verb rather than a noun, and that's going to be the key differential. So to me, these are the facts which will happen, because once you're taking care of these things, the technical skills will follow, because that's easy to inculcate. Putting somebody on a training program, putting somebody on a competency building program, by partnering with the right institutes or right kind of organizations which impart that, it's the easiest thing to do. The difficult thing is changing the mindset. The difficult thing is changing the attitudes. Once you are able to do that, the other pieces will automatically keep on happening. And once you have a more agile workforce, they will automatically focus towards a better learning and better reskilling for themselves in future. So that's what I would actually say, Amit, on this topic.
Thank you. I totally agree, Amit. I think the mindset change, and I like the word you use, that leadership is going to become a verb rather than a tag. And I think there's also a question from the audience, which we will take up shortly. And before we move to that, so Ashish, you actually at SAR Group, you are managing multiple group of companies, as a CHRO. And, and so how do you manage this challenge? And what part of that is centralized as a group? What part of that is decentralized as each company? Because I'm sure, handling different companies in different industries is a different challenge altogether. It's like handling 30 companies separately as an HR leader. So how did you make sure that while you're managing this pandemic situation, you're also able to align everybody to the group goal and the vision, and and also plan for the future for the entire group as well as each company without compromising on any of the individual companies' performances? Ashish, you're in mute. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Amit. Let me give a background that very brief, and I'll be short and crisp in my answer. So we grew during the pandemic time in a classical business by 40-45% CAGR. And we have a track record of growing business of 46-47% for last 10 years. And we did grow by 45% approximately during last year also. When the shops were closed, markets were closed, people were not buying. There was economic depression of 7-8% in the country, GDP decline. How do you grow in this? So one thing we very early realized at the beginning of the pandemic itself, there is no playbook which is available. No, there is no BCP which is going to work. First of all is, and there is no management theory, management hierarchy. There is anything which you learned in the B school, or they famously quoted what you learned in Harvard or in B school, it's not applicable. So we realized it very early that the classical theory is not going to work. Now, what do you do in such a scenario? So essentially, this is the first time out of 7 billion population, 6.5 billion population, 5 billion population of the world was at a flat. Which means everybody was under lockdown. So everyone was facing the same problem, and I think that's the first time after the World War II, the world would have come on the same platform of facing the crisis. And this crisis was in the war. The crisis was not into every household, but this time the crisis was in every household. So the sensitivity to deal with the crisis was more built on the fear than any opportunity around it. So that's a more psychological part of it. Now, when you run an organization, so there are two things which we talked about. How do you manage life? How do you manage livelihood? Without livelihood, there is no life, and without life, there is no livelihood. I mean, how do you survive that? That's the core communication and the thinking around that we built in. at the beginning of the pandemic. The first thing we did is that we will participate and we'll do whatever best is possible to survive during this period, little difficulty, etc., what we will do. But one guarantee we gave it to people is that for next 1 year till the pandemic is there in the country, we are not going to lay off anyone in the company, because just take off the uncertainty from the mind. So that's the first thing which we did. Then the second part is much easier part, because then once you take out this uncertainty, then comes the what do you do on a regular basis, because there is a real market which existed despite the economic slowdown, but there was somebody who was buying and somebody was selling. So then the question was that how do we build how do we go and grab the market share in that scenario? With that, we did a very simple thing, is that we didn't do anything centrally. First of all, we just decentralized everything. So we created a war room we created a central war room, and then we transferred all the learning in that central war room, and we created a chain and hierarchy at the state level and local leadership level. So we completely empowered the local leadership level. So that kind of this thing worked well. The productivity to that extent actually increased during that period of time in a very classical industry also, and of course in the tech-led industries, of course it was far different. So one of the things which I think which we learned, and I said that, and I firmly believe now, is that there is no playbook for L&D available in the world anymore, even if we are out of the pandemic, because the life cycle is going to be different. Is that the leadership level you look at reskilling at two levels. One is a leadership level of reskilling. Second is the competence level of reskilling. I think competence level of reskilling happened automatically, use of technology, etc. What do you do if you had no other choice? So some of the reskilling happened by force, and that's a great advantage for that. The biggest part of the reskilling was actually at the leadership level, where you have to drive things with empathy. You don't lose sight of the relationship. How do you have that human connect, even if you're not meeting somebody physically in that period of time? I think that was the key aspect of building that. I firmly believe is that whatever was happening in routine will no longer happen in times to come. I firmly believe, whether in any industry you operate with, because your customers have changed, and that's what will force you to change. Every customer has changed today, and customer is looking at a different experience. And if you start from there, then come to the organization competency, and then the people competency, and then the work and the leadership competency. Then we have to look at holistically around that. Task has completely changed. There is a more frequent monitoring. The classical PMS is undergoing change. So we are all learning. I am also myself learning that how do you manage the performance management when you were looking at a performance rating, but one of the biggest learning which is happening is that outcome versus this physical presence of a person and kind of thing. So it's a very deep subject which it's more at a psychological level than the skill level. I think psychologically, if you start tuning ourselves, and that's where the whole leadership and the capability building has to happen in the company. And we did a series of sessions around that. I think that's in a brief and summary in a given time. My opinion would be.
No, great. I think thank you, Ashish. I totally echo your experiences. I think one is, of course, the performance management. That's a whole lot of a different area to discuss. It'll take weeks to discuss how do you do that in the new situation. But yes, I think psychological evaluation, and I mean not of the person, but psychologically evaluating the situation and the outcome-based performance management is something that we are all shifting towards automatically. So Ashish, because you talked about the local leadership, I will take an audience question. And I'll pose it to you. And actually, two people have asked the same question: is as in the new situation, the middle level managers and the managers who are managing teams, they've suddenly a lot to handle. There's suddenly a lot to manage. The teams are virtual; they can't meet them, and they are in different industries. So how have you was there a focus program around the mid level managers or the managers to reskill them or to kind of prepare them better?
So two things. What we did is that we had series of communication around it. So I think when I say that more than reskilling, and what do you reskill on? In the how do you use Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Zooms, what do you communicate? See, actually, the whole engagement in the office environment is very different because you have a coffee door conversation, etc. That is completely missing, and physical meeting is missing.
Correct.
One of the greatest advantage of physical of virtual working, and I personally experience and believe is that things happen much faster. Okay,
Yeah,
it happens much faster. It must happens much faster than that. So it's a human beings are a creature of the habits, and as habits form, you start to realize the benefit of it. And most of the, I mean, if you look at 10 years of an work experience, so look, the problem what has happened in and a lot of and it's all mindset. That's what I said. It's more psychological than anything else. The team is still there. Instead of checking them whether they walked in at 9:30, 10 o'clock, you're not checking them in at 9:30. So you have to be outcome basis rather than time basis. So the moment you're on outcome basis and you're doing the right things around that, all engagement is in fine. The only reason what they engage. So we did few workshop, we did communication, and these are largely communication. We didn't call any expert from an outside to talk about. We actually started to speak to them in much more intense manner from the top leadership level itself. So it was demonstration of behavior. So how do you work remotely? We started to work upon that. So once the team saw, then it got percolated. So it's a chain reaction which worked upon. No matter of, I can tell you from my experience, no matter of classroom or any structured program can make you learn this. This is only will happen if you experience this. And I think it's a leadership. That's what I say, that leadership level, empathy, compassion, understanding is the biggest, and the trust. They are four biggest component of the competence is required for the leadership now. If leaders demonstrate these things, change will be very, very smooth.
Totally agree. Thank you for that, Rashish. I think, and we have one question which is, and I'll take it with all of you. And the question is, what are the common critical skills required regardless of the industry? So I think what we'll do is, starting with Ritu, then Amit and Ravi and Vikas, if you could just list set of 4 or 5 skills you have focused on for your industry, I think the audience can then take away the common ones. And I think we already know some of the common ones which are going to come out. But Ritu, if you can kind of start with your focus areas of skills, that'll be helpful.
Sure. So I think, the first one is about the learnability. Everything is in, as mentioned by one of the panelists, is in beta. So we are hiring people today. We are actually looking for the learning orientation. That is the number one. Number 2 is adaptability, because nothing is going to stay constant, how much adaptable you are. Third is focusing on the outcomes and focusing on the north, not looking into the activities. I think these 3 things are very, very important. Last but not the least is the resilience, because at the end of the day, there's so much of chaos. If we have to move forward, we have to be resilient. If people have these 4 skills, they can really do wonders and learn all technical things to move forward in their careers.
Perfect. Thank you, Ritu. Yes, Amit, please.
Yeah. So for me, some of them I actually mentioned that in my opening address also.
Yeah.
But if you have to kind of pick out about 3-4 critical ones, I'd say number 1, of influencing without authority. I think that's going to be a key one going future, because we are going to have more networked organizations. We are going to work in systems where we will not have direct reports everywhere. How do you really work in that kind of a scenario? How do you really get work in that kind of a scenario? How do you really command that trust of the team towards in these scenarios? So that's going to be a critical one in the more networked organizations. How do you influence people without authority and get your work done? Second piece, I'll say the same thing what was mentioned earlier by Ritu about resilience and agility. I think that's very, very critical, because the world is so dynamic. You need to show resilience around the changes, at the same time agility to kind of learn and move ahead. So both have actually go hand in hand. How are you able to withstand these changes as a human being, and then learn and kind of flow with the tide and be be on top of the wave? That's going to be the critical one. And the last one I would call it is more improvisation. So ability to do things on the fly, ability to think on the fly, ability to judgments on the fly, we'll get into situations where you may not be able to always have, you have to call up somebody and try to find out, no, what should I do, boss? This is a situation I'm tied in. The world is moving towards more empowerment. World is moving towards more delegation. So if the delegation and empowerment is given, people also have to act responsibly. In that case, they should be able to take decisions. So that's going to be a critical one. Understand the situation, take decision at that moment, looking at the circumstances there, and take ownership of those decisions rather than always looking at somebody else and asking somebody. These are the things which I would call it will be critical in future.
Perfect. Thanks, Amit. Ravi, what is your set of skills that you are focusing on?
Yeah, thanks, Amit. I think we believe that in our organization that it's more a mindset, and that will lead to these right skills being picked up by everyone, including senior leadership. So we are focusing on 3 different mindsets. So one is the entrepreneurial mindset, growth, and also a collaborative mindset. And I think that a lot of the skills that we are looking forward to amongst us will really come from these 3 broad mindsets that we are focusing on.
Great, thank you, Ravi. Vikas, what in your industry or from your experience, what is your set of skills? I know you mentioned a few, but just to summarize, what is your set of skills focused
Just
on?
to summarize again, building a right culture and environment by helping people and managers to understand physical and mental constraints when the technology is not there or where there's a lack of social interaction, because we need to grow and develop people, right? And they have to perform. So we need to engage with them with right conversations so that they don't leave us. It's very important time, we don't let the talent move out, right? So that conversations and the interactions had to be taught to the managers. Very important skill is more driving inclusivity. And I focus upon that because inclusivity is not only linked to gender, but it's about thought process, right? If your thought process is different than mine, then you're not wrong. This has to be taught to people. And I think pandemic has helped us to get those diverse thought processes come across and do a handshake. I think inclusive is a big journey for, I think, almost all CHROs today or all leaders to drive organization towards inclusivity. Third one is, again, a very unique skill that we acquired. Help people to be rewarded when they acquire skills. Reward them for skill acquisition. Because, it's kind of a scenario where you have a stream of things available and people have to pick and choose basis their requirements. So I think people who should be rewarded who are actually bringing them up to speed with the new technology and new environment. So that's another skill that we need to imbibe into managers to be able to reward people who are stepping up fast. So these are the 3 summarized skills we were looking at in these last few months.
Thank you, Vikas. We have a few more questions, but I know, guys, 1 hour is not enough for this discussion. Even if we just speak with one person, I think it's going to take many hours just to understand what we've done in the last 18 months. And audience, thank you for being so patient and in listening to us. I hope all of you got some takeaways from the session. I definitely learned a lot from all the leaders today. And I would like to thank Ashish, Vikas, Ravi, Ritu, and Amit for spending their time with us, sharing their experiences. And again, everyone, it was an amazing session. Thank you all for being a part of this one. And from my side, have a good day and a happy weekend coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much to all the debaters, who have joined us today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for giving your precious time to us. And thank you, Amit, for having moderating this wonderful session today. Thank you so much. So now, before moving on to the third and the final session, we will have a short break, and in the meantime there will be a video from our sponsors that will be played, so you can enjoy that. And all the viewers, if you want to join the third session, you have to get out from this session and then you have to join the third session in the agenda section. So thank you so much, all the debaters. Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you, everyone.
We'll be back.
Thanks, Amit, for nice moderation, and thanks
Thank
to
you.
all of the panelists.
Thank
Nice
you.
knowing
Thank
you
you,
all.
everyone. Nice
Thank
weekend.
you.
Thank you.
Good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend.